Hi, let's try to understand investment multiplier. So if you look at the two different terms, investment and multiplier. So it simply means that investment is getting multiplied. So what does it mean? It simply conveys the fact that the investment made, it could be markets, I mean to say the private players, or it could be the government. So whenever there is certain X rupees of investment made, maybe in construction of a school or in construction of a hospital, railroad or a new factory, the result of this investment expenditure results in a disproportionate increase in income generated within the economy. That's what the investment multiplier does mean. So the income at the end of the day that people make out of this activity is always going to be a multiple of investment made either by this private investor or the government. That's what the investment multiplier does mean. Now let's try to understand how this works. In fact, you people might have many times used the terms like pump priming, fiscal stimulus. So what is the meaning of the word fiscal stimulus? It's a counter-cyclical initiative of the government to help the economy counter the phases of bust phase, mostly the bust phase. Okay, when the economy is in recession, you might be aware of the fact that the government simply takes the initiative of cutting down its taxes, boosting its expenditure, and how does it help? It helps in boosting the demand that helps the economy recover from the crisis. And people also use the word called pump priming. So a deliberate initiative of government pumping some money or simply pumping some more activity by simply increasing its expenditures and cutting down its taxes. So how does this stimulus helps, and how does this pump priming or whatever we call a investment income multiplier works? That's what we are trying to figure out. To understand it better, let me define you two different terms. One is marginal propensity to consume, the other happens to be marginal propensity to save. One is marginal propensity to consume, the other happens to be marginal propensity to save. For those of you who happen to come across these terms first time, margin simply refers to extra. Propensity does mean tendency. So the extra tendency. So it does mean if you make some 100 bucks, do you end up spending all the 100 bucks? It's not necessary. And would you save all 100 bucks? It might not be same, isn't it? You don't save all the money and you don't spend all the money. So the common tendency of people is out of a given amount of money they make, they happen to spend a certain proportion of money, and that's the rest of the money is what they tend to save. And that's what we are trying to figure out. So the proportion of income that you tend to spend is what I'm calling as a marginal propensity to consume, and whatever is the money that you happen to save is what I call as a marginal propensity to save. Let's suppose a person who makes 100 rupees has the tendency to spend 80% of it, does mean he is spending 80 rupees, the rest of 20 rupees ends up becoming his savings. And I could write the same as this person has a marginal propensity to consume and that's equal to some 0.8, 80%, and the marginal propensity to save is equal to 0.2. So at the end of the day, whatever he has not consumed would end up his savings, or whatever happens to be left after savings is what we would be its consumption. So in fact, in this case, I could simply write the same as MPC is equal plus MPS is equal to 1, because when you make money, you either spend money or you save money. That's it, isn't it? So let's take this and move ahead to understand how the investment made by the government or the private agencies results in income getting multiplied. Let's say maybe the Reliance Industries or the government of India itself has invested some 1,000 crore rupees of money. 1,000 crore rupees of money, maybe for a construction of a road or a hospital, whatever it could be. So this 1,000 crore the government happens to spend. So this is a spending of a government or investment made by the government. And this investment made by the government, or when government happen to spend this money, someone has to receive this money. Someone has to receive this money in the form of income, because government cannot create all these things in open air. So it employs resources. Maybe it employs machines, it employs the labor, or it employs the construction companies, and happens to pay or make the settlements. At the end of the day, the project has been executed. So this 1,000 crore rupees spending by the government would end up becoming income of those people who ever participated in this activity. So this, as of now, the investment made by the government is 1000 crore. The income received by the people who happen to participate in the economic activity in this case is also 1000 crore. So in the first stage, income received by these people is 1000 crore. Now, to make our things simple, for better understanding and make the computation simple, I would assume that in this economy, the marginal propensity to consume is 0.9. Does mean whether it's corporates or whether it comes to governments, individuals, rich, middle class, poor, no matter, irrespective of standard of living, I'm just assuming people have a tendency to spend 90 parts of their income, and rest of 10% or 10 parts of their income is what they have saved, what they tend to save. So marginal propensity to consume, what I'm assuming in this country, I'm generalizing it, 0.9, whereas the marginal propensity to save would obviously be 0.1. Now, if 1000 crore rupees is the money these people receive, what do? They tend to spend 90% of their money. So 90% of 1000 crore is gonna be 900 crore. And why am I adding it? Because when these people spend money, that expenditure of these people would end up becoming income of some other people, isn't it? So these people who received salaries, as a part of this activity, they might be spending money. And how much together they're spending? 90%. And that 90% of 1000 crores is 900 crores. And their spending would end up becoming income of some other people. And these people who receive this money again tend to spend 90% of their income, and that becomes income of some other people. So now it would be 810 crore. And then if it keeps going on, you could see the total income made would keep on going up to infinity. So let me rewrite the same thing. So the marginal propensity to consume we assumed is 0.9. The investment made by the government is 1000 crore. But whereas the income that's made by the people as a result of this spending by government is equal to 1000 crore plus the spending of these people, which becomes an income of the other people, that's gonna be 900 crore. And these people again spend 90% of it, and that's an 810 crore. And then 729, and that keeps on going on up to infinity. So now the question is, what is the total income made by these people? And I hope by this time you might have recognized the fact this total income would be definitely much higher than the 1000 crore. It would be a multiple of 1000 crore. And what is that multiple? In fact, that multiple is what we call as a investment multiplier. That's it. So by what proportion the investment gets multiplied in the form of income made by these people. So I hope you could compute it. Let me rewrite this. So let me give you the value. 1000 crores is what I could write as 1000 crore multiplied by 0.9 raised to the power of 0. And the same again, 900 is what I could write it as 1000 crore multiplied by 0.9 raised to the power of 1. And then 0.9 raised to the power of 2, and so on. And here in this case, I hope you could notice the 0.9 is nothing but the marginal propensity to consume, isn't it? So now, don't you think it is in the form of a series, AR power 0, AR power 1, and AR power raised to the power of 2, AR power raised, okay, I mean, so it keeps going up to infinity. And what's the formula? S infinity is given by A by 1 minus R. So now substitute these values. A is nothing but 1000 crore, and 1 minus R, that's a 0.9. So 1000 by 0.1 is going to be 10,000 crores. 10,000 crores. So when the marginal propensity to consume is 0.9, the investment of 1000 crore gets multiplied to 10,000 crore rupees of income. So now let me generalize it. I would just write simply here in this case. So the income multiplier or the investment income multiplier is simply given by the investment, that is the 1000 crore investment, multiplied by 1 minus MPC, where MPC stands for marginal propensity to consume. So if you have any confusion, let me rewrite here. So the total income that would be a result of an investment made either by the markets, I mean to say the private investors, or by the government, would be a multiple of investment expenditure of them by 1 minus MPC. I could rewrite the same as investment made multiplied by 1 by marginal propensity to save, because you know the fact MPC plus MPS is equal to 1. It's an identity, because what you don't spend would be your savings, or what is left after your savings would be your consumption. In fact, that's what the thing you could do with your money. So I hope now you could figure it out. In fact, this same thing could also explain a very important paradox, what we call paradox of a thrift. Generally, imagine if I say there is some gentleman by name X, and this man makes a good amount of money and he happened to save 90% of his income. So what would be your obvious perception? That this man makes a really good amount of money and high savings is really good for an individual. The reason more savings does mean he could retire early. So generally we have the perception high savings is really good for an individual. But if every person in the economy happens to save 90% of what they earn, is it really going to have the same positive impact on the economy? Is it really going to be good for the economy? Not necessary. In fact, that's what we happen to refer as a paradox of a thrift. The reason is simple. Let's suppose people have a tendency to spend all 100 units of what they make. Does mean if marginal propensity to save is equal to 1, in such case, what would be the total income generated out of an investment made of 1000 crore? It's simply gonna be 1000 crore multiplied by 1 by, and MPS being 1. So it does mean there is no multiplication of income, because people happen to have the tendency to spend all the money. In such case, your income at the end of the day would remain whatever the money that's been invested. Got it? So it does mean higher consumption is better and relatively less savings. I mean to say less savings is the better in this case. It doesn't mean that people should not save a single penny. You might be thinking the same thing. What if the marginal propensity to save would become 0? In such case, it would become 1 by 0, which is an infinity, and the investment get multiplied infinite times. But you know the fact that is not how the tendency, isn't it? People happen to have a tendency to save certain proportion of their earnings, and that's the reason we always happen to come with a condition wherein this cannot be 0. Because we presume that people do prefer, because I'm not referring to one individual. So you might be thinking that there is a person I know where he spends all the money he earns. So there could be some spendthrift people, but when it comes to the overall economy, you always experience a certain proportion of their income turning to become savings. So this is how an investment made by the government or by the private sector results in a multiplication of income made by the people at the end of the day. That's what we call an income multiplier, or simply investment income multiplier. And we could use the same term like what we call a fiscal multiplier. Fiscal multiplier is a term wherein we use when the income multiplied or the impact is because of the fiscal stimulus of the government. So whenever the economy is under crisis, the governments intervene. When the economy is in recession or depression, the governments intervene and they try to stimulate the economy. How come? Boost the demand by cutting down the taxes or increasing expenditure. That's a quite common practice. And that too in democratic countries, whenever the economy crisis, governments always would be happy to celebrate and simply jump in, because that would also makes the government in power popular. Am I right? So that's the reason. So any such kind of initiative of government raising its spending, which obviously results in increasing demand. So that spending of government, let's say of X crores, that would not have the similar impact of X crores at the end of the day. That would result in an increase in the income generated at the end of the day, and that's where we use a term called fiscal multiplier. So let's say investment multiplier or a fiscal multiplier, the formula remains the same. It's simply the money you spend multiplied by 1 minus MPC, and MPC stands for marginal propensity to consume. So in this example, I assumed the marginal propensity to consume is uniform, that is 0.9 or 90%, but in real world it might not be the same. So if you have noticed the fact, the rich have lesser tendency to consume, because out of the great proportion of money or the good amount of money they make, they are relatively to spend lesser amount of money. But when it comes to the poor, The poor, they tend to spend a very large part of their income. So you could end up concluding the fact that the marginal propensity to consume for the poor would be relatively high than compared to the middle class, and for the middle class it would be relatively high than compared to the rich, and for the rich it would be high than compared to the super rich. So here in this case, the reason why I am simply saying it's not going to be uniform, because marginal propensity to consume is simply a measure of the proportion of money you spend for every one extra penny you earn. That's it. Thank you.